that camera and strap in. It's time for another episode of Talk Chat Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news and tips, along with your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus Visionary Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, good Wednesday evening. Thanks for joining me for another live episode of Talk Chat. As always, you know I'm going to ask you, please do me a solid. Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Of course, you can go ahead and click that share button right down underneath the video, or you can go ahead and you can share out the link, TOGCHAT/live. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste that in the chat window for you right now. There we go. And as always, we've got people tuning in from all over the place. So please take a minute, check in, leave me a comment, let me know you're here, let me know where you're watching from. I got Bob here from Las Vegas, Kevin in Missouri, Ken Preston out in LA. We got Anthony down in North Carolina. Patrick's here from Paris. I got Alvin from Virginia, Lane in Indiana, Rick in Connecticut. As always, gang, thank you for spending a Wednesday evening with me to talk about photography. So I'll tell you straight up, I don't have a lot of questions tonight. I got some that came in earlier, so we're good to get going. But come on, if you're going to be here for 60 minutes, how can I help you? What would you like to talk about? What can we dive into? So start typing, post those questions, get them in there. You know that my mission, it's to help photographers like you develop a better understanding of the hows and whys. Okay? So that being said, I got one person that's telling me I got bad audio. Nobody else is saying there's bad audio. So if you're having audio issues, folks, like legit audio issues, let me know. But everything on this end seems to be okay. Let's just check one more time here and make sure all my numbers are where they're supposed to be. So audio is low, guys. Is that what your issue is? We're going to wind up with about 15. It all self-corrected. Okay, interesting. So it's low and it sounds like it's the wrong mic. You guys are absolutely killing me. So not the wrong mic. If it's low, so the bottom line, gang, if you can hear me, you can hear me. We're gonna leave it there because I'm not gonna crowdsource my there. I got a little bit more volume for you, but that's actually got me right on the edge of peaking. Okay, so that's as good as I'm gonna get, guys. So do me a favor, right? Let's talk photography, not audio. If it sucks, it sucks. Hate me, leave, whatever. But that's as good as it's gonna get. Okay, so let's dig in. Questions that I have. First one came in early tonight from let's see, Donald Myers. Please tell me that the camera that you drop in the opening sequence isn't a real working camera. It's a real working camera. It's an EM1 Mark II. It does get dropped. It does not get any damage whatsoever. So think about it, guys. Obviously, I wouldn't drop the camera on a hard surface. So I'm standing in front of a pile of pillows that are covered by a bed comforter. And the smacking sound that you hear, you know, it's a little bit of Foley work, right? The smacking sound that you hear is actually happening in real time. All I did was on top of the comforter that the camera's landing on, put a piece of paper, just a piece of paper. So the smack sound that you hear is the camera smacking the piece of paper as it falls into the comforter. Did no damage. It's fine. It survived. All right. Next question that I had here from Gabe. Whoop, let's get that in the right part of the screen. There we go. How do you shoot a portrait with a wide angle lens to keep the person in proportion and still capture, for example, a landscape? So, Gabe, there's a lot to unpack there actually, because here's the thing. So let me give you something to think about before we even get into kind of how can you best do this. one of the big mistakes that I find photographers make, especially new photographers, when they get this idea of like, ooh, look at this beautiful vista, or look at this cool building. I would love to do a portrait of this person in front of this building or in front of this vista. What they wind up with is a picture that makes the vista look really bad and a picture that makes the building look really bad. And both pictures make the person look really bad. So part of what you have to kind of really ask yourself is, why do you want a picture of a person in front of a landscape? Like, what's the point, right? So, and remember, I'm answering this based on your question. You said shooting a portrait, okay? So if you guys have heard me talk before, you know that somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need a portrait. The first question you should be asking is, why? What is the portrait for? So, I'm curious in terms of how does the landscape tie into the why for the portrait, right? So that being said, if I am going to do an environmental type of portrait where I want to use a wide angle lens, I want to include some of my setting, I want to show my subject in a scene, it's still a portrait. So first and foremost, all the decisions that I am making are based on the idea that I need my subject to look amazing. I don't want to distort my subject, which can be done with a wide angle. And I do not want to have any keystoning where my subject's head is like stretching out the side of the frame, right? So those are my priority pieces. From there, when it comes to the landscape or the building or whatever the background is, I'm also applying the idea of, is this background helping the image? Is it adding something to the image? Or is it really being a distraction? Okay. So, that being said, generally the idea behind doing an environmental portrait, and when I say environmental, that doesn't necessarily mean landscape. That could be, a person in their office. Okay. So it's a human in their environment idea. The idea behind doing an environmental portrait is to kind of tell a little bit more of a story about the person, to give some context, okay? In other words, the minute you're going to try and do an environmental portrait, you have just taken the skill of portraiture and increased the challenge level dramatically because you've got a lot more to deal with. So, generally I am going to be very interested in making sure that that background is at least a little bit soft, not entirely in focus. And that's not a rule. I said generally. I am going to be very careful about paying attention to what are the objects. Are there bright objects? If there's a lot of color, are there areas that are going to pull all the attention, etc.? Because I don't want things that are pulling attention away from my subject. And to get to your kind of the core of your question, Gabe, about using the wide angle with the person, the easiest way, the easiest cheat is to keep the person in the center. That's the easiest cheat, and then not get too close. Because the closer you get with a wide angle, you are also starting to kind of bow the person's face and making it a little bit larger, okay? So, or at least, things like nose and that, making larger. So, basically, if you are doing an environmental portrait and there are no rules, so let's not say basically, let's say generally, you're not going to have a need to crop here on the person's face, right? Which, you guys know that I tend to do a lot with my portraits. So you're going to back up quite a bit. So the problems that you would get from a wide angle, that kind of, distorted effect and that type of stuff, you're really only going to run into issues with your subject if you've got them on the edges of the frame and you're tilting the camera, because then you're going to have keystoning, which is also going to like stretch their head out. Okay. So I guess, Gabe, and I didn't answer the question exactly the way you asked it, because the challenge is the wide angle part is actually not really your challenge. The challenge is not creating a picture that's a hot mess, okay? When we go on vacation, right? We go on vacation with our family or our spouse, and we want to get a picture of the family in front of the Magic Castle at Disney World, or in front of the Colosseum in Rome. Well, that's a situation where that's not a portrait. That is literally a family snapshot, and indeed we want a picture that shows the family or family member with that setting. So we want lots of depth of field. We're not creating, portraits. But when you say portrait, that means the picture's about the person. So if it's an environmental portrait and we're going to use, some of the scene, then, that's it. But, and so Gabe, I see your follow-up here. You're thinking of doing some environmental shots. Using a 35 is height a consideration with keystoning? No, height isn't a consideration, Gabe. You're actually not thinking this through, man. Height's not a consideration. Eric, thank you so much, man. I appreciate the super chat. Camera angle is the consideration, because I can't tell you that height is a consideration because I don't know how tall your subject is. I don't know what the scene is that you're shooting, right? So I don't know how much of your subject you're going to include. I mean, I could shoot an environmental portrait on the top of a skyscraper and obviously be looking down at the city. And think about that. I'm on the top of a skyscraper. My subject's sitting maybe like near the edge of the roof of the skyscraper, and I want to get the city. So am I going to try and shoot straight on? No, why would I want to do that? Because I lose a lot of the skyline. So I want to stand above them, kind of shoot down, and then I get more of the expansive scape. Okay? So Gabe, what I really want to know, since you're still pushing me for an answer, and that's cool, man. All right. I want to know, why are you shooting the environmental portraits? Tell me your why, and then I'm going to tell you what you need to worry about. Because honestly, you're worrying about the wrong stuff. Based on your questions, you're going to take a picture that's just a big mess. Because I'm very worried about your background. Why do you need an environmental portrait? Like, that's the key. Why? Portrait and environment, when you put the two together, it's usually for a purpose like photojournalism, for telling a story. Not always. So tell me the why, and then I can tell you everything you need to worry about. But you're giving me a question that honestly there's 50,000 variations on. So it's hard for me to give you an answer that's actually going to be beneficial. Okay? But obviously, anytime you tilt a wide angle lens, it's going to keystone, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a portrait, doesn't matter if it's an architectural shot, doesn't matter if it's a landscape, doesn't matter what the heck it is. If you tilt the lens, it's going to keystone. That's what a wide angle lens does, right? So tell me the why, and then I can help you more with what you're trying to do, okay? All right, let me scroll back up here. I saw a question come by from Tina, and I'll get back to Gabe's once I get more information from Gabe. So Tina says, I'm thinking about purchasing Topaz for noise reduction. I have not downloaded the trial version yet. Is this software difficult to learn? I do not need another complicated software program. So Tina, obviously just based on your question, you shouldn't get it. I mean, I don't want to sound mean, and I'm not trying to sound like a jerk, but photography doesn't work like that, right? So good photography takes learning. Software takes learning. If you're going to use it to its best ability, it takes learning. Not to be difficult, but I'm going to go back to my standard question. Why do you think you need Topaz for noise reduction? I don't know why you need noise reduction, especially for the shots of yours that I've seen in my Facebook group. I don't know why you need noise reduction unless, you're shooting a full frame here and then you're trying to crop it down to a tiny little thing here, which that's just bad photography. No software in the world is going to save your butt for that. It's just not, okay? Because you are choosing to reduce the quality of your picture the moment you press the button, period. So, but unfortunately, software requires education. Any software does. I guess the difference between you and me, and the difference between me and a lot of people, if I find something that is new technology that is going to help me, I'm like, yeah, let's learn it. That's awesome. The education is wonderful. I am of the mentality that the minute I'm done learning, I'm done. It's over, finished, put it down, walk away. That's it. So I can help you more if I know why you need noise reduction, because I hope you're aware that there are noise reduction utilities in Photoshop already, which handles 99.9% of any noise reduction I ever need to do. So I'm more concerned with why is it that you feel the need that you have to go to that software. So give me some input there, and I can help you out with that. Okay. All right. So let's see. Iralaz, I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation of the name there. If I am, I apologize. So Iralaz, I don't recognize your name. I want to point out that your comment here is very good. I've seen 2 comments that indicate to me that you like to weigh in on how you do things. This is a Q&A where people ask me questions and I give answers, meaning it's my classroom, okay? So if you have something to contribute that I leave out, by all means do that, but there's only one teacher here, okay? So I talk all the time about dealing with clothing and all those things. Gabe happens to be a member of my mentoring program. He's very familiar with those conversations. So it would be good for you to follow along and maybe you'll learn something. But while you're typing, you can't learn something. So if you have a question, I'd love to answer your question and help you. But if you don't need help, then I don't know why you're here. Literally, you're just wasting time on YouTube. Okay, so, all right, Tina, so whoops, I keep going to the wrong chat window here to get those things up here. Let's get these. And then Beverly, I'm going to get your depth of field question up there. In BIF, I find it hard to get fast enough shutter speed and then wind up with a high ISO. Pictures of hummingbirds, I will post what I have later. In BIF, what am I missing in the BIF? What is BIF? I'm sorry. If that's like obvious and I'm just having a brain fart, my apologies. And I don't know. Yeah. So, I mean, part of the challenge here is, Tina, like, birds in flight. Okay. Thank you. I'm not a bird photographer. I'm a portrait guy, right? Remember that? Okay. So, so in terms of, getting a fast enough shutter speed and then winding up with a high ISO, I would encourage you, Tina, to check out what Scott Bourne does. I know you're an Olympus shooter. Scott Bourne shoots hummingbirds like nobody's business. I know you're familiar with Scott Bourne. He's got a lot of articles on the Get Olympus website, okay? He has no problems having to shoot with high ISO. He has no noise issues, none. So the idea that you're not getting a fast enough shutter speed and then you're having to push your ISO up says to me you're approaching it wrong. But you're asking a portrait guy a bird question. So honestly, that's really not the way to do it. That's why I'm referring you to, hands down, the best bird photographer that you're going to find. And he just happens to use the same kind of cameras that you do. And, that's Scott Bourne. Okay, so look, I can't answer you any basic question about photography. I'll tell you part of the problem that you're running into. I do know for a fact that frequently, not all the time, but frequently, when Scott shoots hummingbirds, he uses strobes. Problem solved. You set the strobes up properly, the lighting looks completely natural, does not look at all fake, and the lighting is going to give you the stop action that you need. Even with a full frame camera, you're going to run into a situation where if you're going to try and stop hummingbird wings just with natural light, you're going to have to be shooting at ridiculous shutter speeds. And then, of course, you're going to have to push ISO. So, again, you're looking kind of for shortcuts, Tina, and yeah, I mean, I know for a fact that not all the time, but a lot of time, Scott goes out and basically sets up a studio in a space where there are hummingbirds. And when I say sets up a studio, sets up a background, sets up a couple lights, and takes the most amazing hummingbird images that you've ever seen. And what's stopping the action is not the camera at that point. It's the lighting that's stopping it because the strobes are extremely fast. It's a much more efficient way. It's a higher quality way, regardless of the sensor size of the camera that you're using. So, I would suggest maybe that part of the challenge is, and I know you're fairly new to the Olympus realm. You're trying to do all these different things, but you gotta put some research in, and you've got to look for the best ways. And it's not always going to be as simple as just pick up the camera and shoot. That's the challenge. Okay. But yeah, check out Scott's stuff. Scott has a ton of information on the Get Olympus website about how he shoots all the different birds, everything from the eagles to the hummingbirds. Even on his website, he's got quite a few tutorials that he's put together, and there's simply nobody better. There just isn't. So he is absolutely the best when it comes to that stuff. Okay. All right, Beverly had a question here about depth of field. So, do you just estimate the distance where your client is at to determine the 1/3, 2/3? If they're at a long or even short distance, you just estimate the distance from you? No. So the 1/3, 2/3 thing is something that I've only got to worry, like for a portrait. If I'm shooting a model or shooting a portrait, the idea that I'm actually worried about, like what space do I have in front of my subject and what space do I have behind my subject is in focus, that's almost never going to happen. In fact, like when you've heard me talk about that here on TOGCHAT and some of my other videos, it's always in the context of like a group of people where you've got depth to the group. So like the only time Ken, Scott's hummingbirds are like amazing. So Scott, part of what makes Scott, and this is what actually, and Beverly, I'm going to come back to your question. I apologize, but since I just saw Ken's comment, part of what you guys should realize, all of you, as photographers, okay? Since I mentioned Scott Bourne, I know a lot of you are going and checking him out right now while we're talking, and that's awesome. You should do that, okay? What you may not realize when you go look at his work, Scott Bourne has a PhD in ornithology. So part of what makes his bird images so amazing is that he knows everything there is to know about the birds. He understands their habits. He understands how to get them to behave in the ways he wants. And I don't mean like train a bird to eat off your hand. I mean, like, for instance, if he wants to shoot a certain kind of bird, he'll go out and he'll find, a tree or something that bird is partial to and who, that bird is likely to travel to. And then he'll even add food to it, etc. And he'll sit in a blind for literally like 7 or 8 hours at a time to be able to shoot. So he understands his subject, and it's important to understand that. Like, I know so many of you, you ask me questions about photographing models and portraits, and then I start talking psychology stuff, and I fully know if I could just look through the camera, so many of you, the minute I go there, are just like eyes glazed over. It's like, yeah, I don't care about that stuff because I just want to take pictures. Right? I want it to be easy. I just want to pick up the camera and I want to take pictures. And I want to process my images, but I don't want to learn software. I don't want to have to learn this. I just want to do it. That's not how good photographers get good pictures, and that's not how great and amazing photographers get amazing pictures. And so it's a great example because, part of the reason why Scott is so amazing at what he does, and this is not taking anything away from his photography skills, but it's the fact that he understands those birds inside and out. And he understands their habits. He understands everything they're going to do and how they're going to respond to things. He knows the right time of year to get them, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, he's got images of him in Alaska laying on the ground like 5 feet in front of bald eagles with, he's shooting with a 17 millimeter lens, and the bald eagles have their wings like straight out open, and just amazing work. He's able to do that because he understands the birds, and that's how he's able to get that close and be able to interact with them and do that kind of stuff. So, again, that's the key. The photography stuff, I hate to tell you folks, that's the easy part of any of this. Portraits, weddings, landscapes, nature, wildlife, animals, you name it. The photography part's the easy part. That's why it's such a big deal that you learn the basics, that you understand the basics. That way, you then go on to really learn to understand your subject matter. And that's what takes your work to a whole nother level. Okay? All right, so back to Beverly and the depth of field things. So let me put that back on the screen. So I honestly, Beverly, when I'm shooting portraits, so if there's something different that you're shooting, let me know, and I'll try and, give you context there, right? But I never worry about the 1/3, 2/3 thing at all. The example that, Beverly, I'm studying the PPAC exam and wanted to understand this. Okay, so there's a couple challenges here, right? You need to do a little bit more research, Beverly, and unfortunately, I don't have the time to dig into this in a 1-hour talk chat. So let me tell you what you need to go research, okay? Frequently, and I don't know this for a fact. I'm making a guess here. And that's why I want you to research it. Don't take my word for what I'm about to say, okay? I have a feeling that the answers that PPA are looking for in the context of this specific question, right? The 1/3, 2/3 part of depth of field. I have a feeling that they are teaching it and expecting an answer that is based on the traditional traditional teaching of it. I apologize. Hang on just 1 second. Wow, it's like... So, K. Adam Christensen. I don't know when you dropped in here. If you've been here for a while, maybe you just came in. I'm really appreciate the fact that you are willing to help people out. But they have come to my TOGCHAT to ask me questions. I don't want them leaving this TOGCHAT with information that I may not approve of. So my classroom, please respect that. If there's something I can help you with, I would love to help you. Otherwise, I don't know why you're here. You should be out taking pictures and using your time much more productively, okay? But if you came here just to answer questions, then I'm sorry, you're in the wrong place, okay? So, Beverly, the problem with the 1/3, 2/3, and actually I had somebody point this out to me recently because most people have never even heard of the 1/3, 2/3 thing with depth of field. It is an average, meaning it's not always 1/3, 2/3, right? So it's, on one hand, probably the answer they're looking for, but on the other hand, it's actually factually incorrect to say that it's always 1/3, 2/3. You may notice, if you follow me for a while, anytime I talk about that idea of 1/3, 2/3, I do it in the context of photographing a group with like 5 rows of people. In that situation, almost any lens is going to create the 1/3, 2/3 situation because of the distance that you're going to be, et cetera, et cetera. So let me give you the explanation, the way it has been taught traditionally, but I want you to understand, because that's how I learned it actually, 1/3, 2/3. It's not 100% factually correct, okay? Depending on the camera, the lens, the distance, the apertures, all that kind of stuff, that 1/3, 2/3 fluctuates. But the idea is, the way that it's taught is that generally speaking, you will have, from wherever your focal point is, so let's say this is the focal point right here at my nose, camera's over here, right? It says basically that 1/3 of the depth of field will be in front of the focal point and 2/3 of the depth of field will be after the focal point. That's the lesson that's taught. And the way that it's taught is, it does not matter if you're shooting with a telephoto lens, a wide angle lens, a 50mm lens. It doesn't matter what the distance is that you're at. It doesn't matter what the aperture is that you're at. None of that matters. based on all of those factors, based on the combination of your ISO, your shutter speed, your aperture, your lens, your focal distance, whatever the amount of depth of field, even if it's only this much depth of field, right? 1/3 in front, 2/3 after. Okay, so basically the field, it will line up 1/3 in front, 2/3 after. It is absolutely fine to generalize that, okay? But please at least understand that that's not 100% accurate. So the best thing that you can do is Google the phrase depth of field calculator. And if you look at a depth of field calculator and you start to manipulate it, you'll actually be able to see what I'm talking about. It's not always going to be exactly 1/3, exactly 2/3. It does fluctuate. It can be, depending on the combinations and depending upon the optical design of the lens, it can be as much as 50-50. 50 in front, 50 behind. But general rule of thumb, 1/3, 2/3. So yeah. So you're looking for two answers. One is the answer that's going to get you the right grade on the test. The other is the more depth of knowledge that's not going to get you stuck. But in terms of shooting portraits, Beverly, I never worry about that at all. It's not a factor. Okay, so that's what I would recommend. So James Marshall. So he's asking then, how do you get a sharp photo then if focus tends to miss where you want to focus? You get your lenses calibrated. I mean, if your focus tends to miss where you want to focus, that means you either have a calibration problem, James, or you're doing something really wrong as the photographer, right? So if I'm misunderstanding your question, let me know. But that's the answer. Anytime I hear focus tends to miss, that says to me that you've got a calibration issue with your lens and camera matchup, or you're not using the camera properly, meaning you're not moving the focal point to where it should be. Okay, so it's got to be one of those two things. But if I'm misunderstanding that, let me know. Okay, all right. Let's see here. Scrolling back up. And where was it? There was King Wufa. Where do you guys come up with these names? Okay. Sorry if you already discussed this. Late to the party. Any thoughts on David Burnett's open letter to MPPA on Petapixel? What's behind it? So here, actually, let me go to the letter. I actually just saw this for the first time yesterday. And I'm not going to even attempt to tell you that I fully understand all of it at this point. I will tell you that I have enough respect for David Burnett. Honestly, my gut response is I'm with him. Like, that's my gut response. However, the way that I am understanding this, there is here, I'm going to switch my screen over so that you guys can view this. I've got the article up on Petapixel. I will gladly share the URL with all of you so that you can check this out. Basically, NPPA, that's the National Press Photographers Association. So that's kind of like the national the national organization for press photographers, okay? They have come up with this new photo bill of rights that basically, and I'm quoting from the article here, it calls for, among other things, consent from subjects in public spaces. So we're talking about for newspaper photographers, folks, photojournalists. So that's basically saying if you're at a rally or a riot or a gathering, it could be photographing a family that's having a picnic in the park. It could be anything. It means that you should not be photographing them unless you have previously asked for their permission. So based on that very simplistic understanding of this situation, King Wufa, I would have to say that that's just complete BS. I pray that that never happens. I think it will be absolutely devastating if it happens. This is essentially kind of the equivalent of like a code of ethics, how they feel people should behave. So this is not a law. I want to make sure everybody understands nobody's changing a law here. These are basically the recommendations from NPPA to its members. But yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion, to say that. You know, as David alludes in his message, you know, he's getting old. I am kind of, you know, not that far behind him, but a little bit behind him in the age scale. I worked as a photojournalist in the heyday of photojournalism, you know, late 70s, early 80s. I could not imagine having to do my job then, not being able to take a picture before I asked someone for permission to take the picture. If I'm going to try and look into the future with an open mind, do I think it's possible that we could get to the point where that is either, shall we say, proper etiquette, or for that matter, maybe even a law? I do think it's possible. I'm not saying I want that. Gosh, no. But, you know, the world's changing. Like it or not, this is not one of those, you know, political debates or, you know, I'm not dumping on younger generation stuff. No, it's just the world's changing. I think it will be a shame. I think it will be devastating. And what I do think it would do, it would honestly, I feel, be an affront to the way our government was designed. The First Amendment exists not so that you have free speech to say something obnoxious. The First Amendment exists to create part of the system of checks and balances, right? Those checks and balances are extremely important. So the idea that somebody could just turn around and say, no, I don't want to be photographed, that essentially eliminates that system of checks and balances. So yeah, but do I think you can get to that? Yeah, I mean, come on, folks, let's face it. Just look at the last 4 months, right? We are seeing the world change at lightning speed right now. And you know what? Most of it is change that needs to happen. So it's good. But at the same time, you know, we've got to be smart about things, okay? The world that we live in, you know, the world as we know it, it was not created in 3 or 4 months in the middle of a pandemic. So we can't undo it all in the middle of 3 or 4 months, because unfortunately we can make a lot of superficial changes, but those superficial changes don't change the underlying problems. They don't change the underlying beliefs and attitudes. That's going to take a lot of work, and we need to do that work. I am all for that work. So don't get me wrong, but yeah, I'm glad all these changes are happening, but at the same time, we can't sit back and say, okay, cool, we changed all this stuff. It's all fixed now. No, we haven't fixed anything. We literally have not. Evolution, it takes time and it takes a lot of work. So, but yes, this particular thing, I honestly don't think it will go very far. To be completely honest with you, I can't imagine the membership of MPPA going along with that. I really can't. So I would honestly not be surprised if, you know, the membership of MPPA ganged up and said to the current, like, board of directors or whatever, you're out of here. Like, I don't see that. I don't see that happening. Okay. All right. Let's see. For CL, when shooting with a studio strobe in direct sunlight, would you recommend using an ND filter or a scrim? In previous photos, you stated that using high-speed sync is hard on the strobe. So, CL, high-speed sync is hard on the strobe, but that doesn't mean, so let's be clear, it doesn't mean that high-speed sync is bad, right? Excuse me. My whole thing with high-speed sync, a lot of people seem to feel that I don't like high-speed sync. I love high-speed sync. I just never use it, right? The problem that I have with high-speed sync is there are so many photographers today, because of a group of YouTubers, that think outside, high-speed sync. Those two are locked together. There's no other way to shoot outside. Which is ridiculous. Number one, all their pictures look the same. Boring. It just is, right? So understand that high-speed sync allows you essentially to match or overpower the sun. Well, guess what? We used to do that back in the 1970s when there was no high-speed sync. So all my argument is, if you understand how to do it without high-speed sync, then high-speed sync becomes a feature that is a convenience to you, and it allows you to make your work easier. But if you're going to use high-speed sync with the idea, well, I'm outside, and so use high-speed sync, well, then no, that's kind of boring, and everything looks the same at that point, right? So as far as, let me get your question back up here, sorry. As far as, do you need to use an ND filter or a scrim? No, I have always worked outdoors with the idea that, hey, if I want to shoot outdoors, in fact, if you watch the video that I have on shooting portraits outside in bright sunlight, which it sounds like you may have found that video, let me bring that one up on the screen here, and I'll show you which one I'm talking about. Here, let's get rid of the question. If we go to my YouTube channel, you click on the magnifying glass, I'm just going to type the word sunlight. There it is. And I'm going to share the link to this with you. If you watch this video, it's all about shooting portraits in bright sunlight. And the irony of it is, if you pay close attention, I show you like 6 different examples of how I shoot portraits in bright sunlight. All but one of them, I've got the model in the shade, right? Because that's how you shoot portraits in bright sunlight. Why do you want that harsh light? Like, why, right? I don't have a problem if I've got to go work outside. I don't have a problem taking 5 minutes, or better yet, taking half an hour the day before and surveying my location and figuring out where can I take my subject that's going to give me a nice, attractive background with good lighting at the time of day that I'm going to be there. Done, right? So, yeah, I mean, you can work with ND filters. That's one way to deal with the backgrounds. You can work with a scrim so that you're basically cutting out the sunlight from your subject. I have done both. I do both. But honestly, especially at this point in my career, I'm not a big one for hauling that much equipment out. I'm just not. So more than likely, I'm going to go out and I'm going to carefully select my location, maybe find a tree that creates some nice shade. Because basically, if I find a big tree that I put them under, the tree doesn't have to be in the picture, right? Could I get my subject under the tree? There's my scrim. I don't need a scrim, right? So the tree becomes a scrim, and there's tons of trees. So, and again, you can't always find, a tree. I've used like the entranceways to office buildings. If I was shooting a model where I needed to look like more of, kind of a commercial or office type or business type look, and, the entranceway with an overhang becomes a scrim. Put the model in shade, right? The background's in bright sunlight, but once she's in shade and I light her, it's like she's in a studio, because it's really, really easy for me to overpower the sunlight in the shade. Right? And I don't need high-speed sync. I don't need anything. So I don't want you to walk away and think, oh my God, if I use high-speed sync, I'm going to destroy my strobes. No, but if you use high-speed sync to the extreme, and if you do not let your strobe cool down, and you just push and push and push and push with high-speed sync, yes, you are essentially wearing out your strobe, and you're shortening the life of the tube with it. So high-speed sync is very taxing on a strobe unit. Doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. It just means understand that there's a difference between using it and abusing it. And if you are using it, you should be using it to create a look and a feel that you can't do any other way, period. Okay? So, Beverly, what are you asking me here? Shooting in sunlight, what if there's a building you want to include? What are you using? Another building, a tree, maybe a scrim, okay? But Beverly, I'm gonna go back to the statement that I made before with Gabe and the portrait. How much of that building do I need, and why do I need it? Like, if I'm shooting a model, why do I want the building, right? So, again, you gotta be careful when you're picking backgrounds. Like, is the picture about the subject, or is the picture about the background? So am I taking a picture of the model or a picture of the building? That's the thing that you've got to you got to make sure how much of it are you showing, how much do you need, and why. But there's lots of different ways to go about it. Okay, looks like on the same topic, Robert Brown Jr. How do you balance ambient and flash using a light meter? What do you put in the camera? The ambient numbers, ISO, aperture, shutter, or okay? So wow, you're making that so much harder than it needs to be, Robert. So let's forget about all of that lingo. All right, it's real simple. When you're going to use flash outside and you want to balance, so let's be clear. Balance means balance. That's making whatever is lit by the flash the same exposure as what is being lit by the sun. Balance. So it's easy. Take a meter reading for the ambient light, set those settings in your camera, which you don't need a handheld meter, but if you want to, knock yourself out, okay? Once you have your camera set for the ambient light, turn on your flash and start adjusting the power of the flash until it matches. Done. You're there. So you don't have to use a meter to do that, but you can, okay? But yeah, anytime you're gonna mix flash with ambient light, it is easiest and most efficient meter and set your ambient first. So even like for the photographers who I give a hard time to all the time that want to overpower the sun, right? Just like all the other YouTubers do so that they can be zombies and take the same picture. So fine, it's still the same thing, right? Take your meter reading of your ambient light, underexpose it to stop, do your test shot, and look at it and say, yep, that's exactly how dark I want the background. Boom. And then go ahead and set your strobe then and just power up the strobe until it's giving you that output of light. Boom. You're good to go. So it's always going to be ambient first, then the strobe. It's the fastest, most efficient way and most consistent way to get it done. With or without a meter. Either way will work. Okay. Josh Peters, I shoot mainly beauty and fashion in my studio, and I started my part-time company as a photographer. How did you find your first customers, or how did they find you? Well, I'm not going to lie to you, Josh. I mean, I'm curious where you're at in the world. Finding customers for beauty and fashion work, good luck. I'm just being straight with you, okay? Two categories where it's like really not a lot of money, man. There's no money in the fashion world unless you're like within the top 1% of all the photographers, literally. And in the beauty world, same thing. If you're thinking like, oh, magazines, like, oh, I want to shoot for Vogue and all that kind of stuff, yeah, good luck, okay? You better be turning out some really, really amazing stuff. So Josh, you're in the Netherlands. So yeah, even worse, I mean, you're in a tiny country, okay? So you're in Europe. Your biggest fashion markets are indeed like Milan, Rome, Paris, London. Those are your big fashion markets. Okay. My advice to you, if you like beauty and fashion and you want to make money, what you need to do is you need to build out experiences around the idea of beauty and fashion and sell it to the average person. It's not as sexy, doesn't sound as cool. It's not like saying, ooh, I shot for Vogue, okay? But the fact of the matter is most fashion magazines don't pay a lot of money. They don't have to. They simply don't have to. That's the point. Photographers are dying to get tear sheets, right? So, that's why most of your big fashion photographers around the world, they don't own studios. They don't even own their gear oftentimes. They just rent when they're shooting because they can't afford the overhead. Because they're actually not making a lot of money on that stuff. They're out doing, commercial work along the way. So, but, how do you find clients? Ultimately, it's the same regardless of where you're shooting. You got to go to your clients. So if you want to shoot for magazines, go to the magazines, contact them, say, hey, I'd like to show you my portfolio. Boom. Okay. And don't think that, contacting a magazine in the US to show them your portfolio is the best way to do it, unless your portfolio is the most amazing thing that's ever hit the face of the earth. Because, like New York is an example, all the top fashion photographers in New York still carry actual physical portfolios, big prints, most amazing books you've ever seen. These days, they're all hardbound. They're gorgeous, okay? So, yeah, you need to have a website. You need to have an online portfolio. It needs to be incredible. But if you're going to start reaching out around the world to show off your portfolio, it's not going to get you anywhere. Even if you're willing to work for free, Josh, and do the stuff for the magazines for free, then what you have to do is you do what's called shoot on speculation. So you find yourself a makeup artist, find yourself a stylist, find yourself a model or a couple of models, and you come up with a concept. So again, it's collaboration, because if you think that you're the guy that's doing all of it, you're kidding yourself, right? As a beauty and a fashion photographer, you ain't nothing without your creative team, period. So every picture I have, it took at least 3 people to do it. I'm the lucky one that gets to put my name on it. That's a fact. So you put together a great team, you find your talent, you come up with a concept, you collaborate on a concept, and you shoot the concept. You basically shoot the layout. And then what you're doing is you're submitting the layout on spec. You stand a much higher chance of getting published if you submit a finished product than if you just say, hey, here's my work. Look how great it is. I would like to work with you. That's not, honestly, it's not going to get you anywhere. So you actually need to basically submit a finished story. And that's what's going to get picked up. Because what you're doing by doing that, when you submit a finished story, if you've done your research properly, you're submitting a story that when they're looking at your pictures, they're going to have a hard time not imagining that layout in their magazine. If you submit a set of images and they're looking at it and like, what the hell is this? We would never publish anything like this. You've basically proven that you don't understand their publication. And you're also done with them at that point. You're not going to get anywhere with them. So the whole point behind shooting on spec, putting together a layout and submitting it, when you do that, you should have a publication or publications in mind. Not just, titles that you thought of and said, oh yeah, I want to be in Vogue, or I want to be here, but you have researched them. You have looked at the way they do their layouts. You have literally broken it down statistically, like how many full page images do they run, how many smaller ones, how many tend to be full length, how many tend to be close-ups, all that kind of stuff. You should be working all that out in advance so that when you submit it, they're essentially seeing a layout that, man, this is like, this would look amazing in our magazine. Done. Okay. But yeah, unfortunately, it's just not a lot of money. It is tough. It's literally like probably, honestly, less than 1% of the fashion photographers in New York City are making real bank. The rest are doing fashion when they can and, shooting other stuff to stay alive, or honestly working other jobs. I know quite a few that work part-time and they've got credits in Vogue and other major publications, but they actually only shoot part-time because they can't afford to live in New York if they're not working another, real gig. So again, that's part of kind of how the world is evolving in that sense. Everybody wants it, so it's a buyer's market, which means they don't have to pay a lot of money. That's the challenge. So sorry to give you that bad news, but yeah, that's the reality of it. And it's not going to be any different in different parts of the world. It's the same world around. So, all right, let's see. James Marshall, where'd that question go? I just saw it go by here. All right, I'm on my way to James's, but I got this one from Danny. I just bought an EM1 Mark III a month ago, and I got the 45 1.8, but was looking to get the 45 1.2 for night portraits. Is there a big difference in sharpness and quality? Nah. I haven't found a bad Olympus lens yet. So keep in mind, the biggest difference between the two, obviously one's a 1.2, one's a 1.8. Also, the 1.2 Pro is metal casing. It's weather sealed. The 1.8 is not. Okay. 1.8 is a lot smaller and lighter and less expensive also than the 1.2. But no, in terms of what are you going to see for quality difference, you're not really going to, you're really not going to see a big difference. Okay. All right. Mario, I saw one of your videos on changing the color of the background with strobes and gels. Can that be done with one speed light instead of two for a portrait? Absolutely, Mario. Yeah. So the video that you're talking about here, let me switch back over. And I'll put it up here. Let's see. Background. Best color for background is gray. Let me get the link here. I'll put this in the chat window for you. The key to making it work with one light, Mario, is the distance, right? So if you're using a speed light, in fact, you mentioned speed light. So if you're using a speed light, it's got a rectangular, front to it, rectangular head. So the light's going to come out and it's going to travel and spread this way. And the further away that it gets, the rounder that it gets, right? So your challenge is if you're working in a really small space and you have to have that speed light really close to the background, then you're not going to be able to light the whole background. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use it that way. You can let it fall off, right? In fact, here, I can give you guys, I'll give you guys an example of what I'm talking about. Let me switch my screen again here. So let's, can I make this a speed light easy or not? I don't think I can switch it easily to a speed light. I can't. So I'm going to do this with a studio strobe, but no, you know what? Here, let me switch it over to a speed light. Put that there. I'm going to turn this one off. Boom. We'll put the speed light behind my model. Okay. And I'm going to turn it so that it's facing the background. Okay. I'm going to lower a little bit. And just so that you guys can see easily what it's doing, we're going to give it like a red gel. Okay. So now... also, let me turn the power up so you can see. Okay, so you can see right now that speed light, it's only, let's see, 1, 2, it's a little over 2 feet from the background. So it's only covering a very small portion of the background. And if you look at the finished picture, I'm shooting really close to her, and we can hide it because obviously I see you can see it in the shot. So we'll move it over. So there, it's hidden, okay? But you can see the light falling off on the edges. So now, if I start to bring that further away, and I'm actually going to come down a little bit lower here and do this. So now you can see it doesn't fall off as much and you can see how much more area it covers. Now, part of the challenge is right now I've got it at full power. So the intensity of the red has died down a little bit. And I happen to be on a black background right now instead of a gray, okay? But one of the cheats, but it's about finding balance, okay? If I zoom the flash in, see how the light gets brighter? But if I zoom it in too far, notice how it covers a smaller area and I start to get the vignetting again, right? So it's all about balancing things out. But if you have enough space, the simple answer is if you have enough space that you can back the light away far enough, then yeah, you can totally work with a speed light and do it with one light. Absolutely. Or even, as I mentioned, if you're okay with having like a vignette or having the light fall off, then yeah, there's lots of ways that you can get around that. Okay. Let's see. Gosh, I saw that question. And so Robert had a question up here. Let me get this one. We're going to go over tonight. Shocker, right? I have a friend from Uganda. She has agreed to do a portrait session. This is my first time that I have photographed a darker skin tone, so I'm hoping you have some lighting and or exposure tips. Also, she'll be dressing in her colorful African clothing and headdress. Honestly, Robert, there's really nothing that you have to do different. There really isn't, okay? The biggest challenge is, especially with if she is really dark, so given that she's from Uganda, she's probably really dark, okay? Any shine on that skin is going to cause you, like, really hardcore hot spots, okay? That's where the problem comes in. So it's really, really important that you either work with a makeup artist or you make sure that this young lady, did you say she's doing her own makeup? You didn't say. So if she's doing her own hair makeup, it's extremely important that you let her know she has to matte the makeup, right? And not with powder. Powder is really bad, okay? She's got to use like matte foundation. She's got to get as much shine off her face as possible. And what I would encourage you to do is go to Walgreens or CVS or Rite Aid or one of those drugstores and buy the little makeup tissues that you can blot with, okay? You can use like a regular, like a Kleenex and blot. The problem is a Kleenex is going to be, it's going to cause two problems. One, it absorbs and the makeup blotters don't absorb. And two, if you get the slightest little bit of wrong movement, you're going to smudge the makeup with a tissue. the makeup blotters won't smudge. Not unless you're really like, then it's going to smudge. But if you're just dabbing, they won't. So the other way you kind of protect yourself, Robert, to make things not harder than necessary, broader light sources, right? The bigger the light sources that you use, the softer the light will be. The softer the light, the less likelihood that you are going to have of creating shine on her face. But super, super important. I see here that you said that she and your wife are going to be doing the makeup. So you want to keep her skin matted as much as possible. Go with broader, softer light sources so that you're not creating specular highlights that are going to blow out. And then obviously, given that she's going to be wearing a lot of color and there's probably patterns which can be really, really busy, it's, kind of her cultural garb that she's wearing. So if it's busy, right? But that means be very careful with your background choices. I would certainly go with some color on the background, but keep it simple. Okay, you want color that's going to really kind of accent what she's wearing and what's going on there, not that's going to clash with it for sure. Okay, so anyway, that would be my advice to you there. Okay, let's see here. Oh, there's the one I was looking for. James Marshall. Joe, I feel that some of my photos suck. Mine too. Happens to all of us. It really does. I tend to do streets sometimes, other things in COVID, so I'm here to learn because I feel, right. And, James, here's my advice to tell you the truth. I'm honored that you have turned to me to learn some stuff. What I would really encourage you to do, just go pick up that camera, man. When you're not doing well, and especially when it's kind of beating you emotionally, when you're getting frustrated with it, the best thing to do is pick up the camera and even continue to suck, literally. Because each of those experiences where you suck, you're learning things, right? Now, in order to turn that around, to really turn it around, you've got to put in the effort after you suck to look at the pictures and not just say, I suck. Because we all do that, right? That's the gut response, okay? But what I'm sorry. Is there a full moon tonight? Would somebody just please tell me, really, is there a full moon? I am so afraid to ask, but good looking honky. Yeah, welcome. Anyway, so it's an adventure, gang. So anyway, James, you got to look at the images and you have to ask yourself, once you get past the I suck part, you got to ask yourself, what would I do different? What could I do different? Okay. And that's actually where you're going to teach yourself. And then by all means, watch my talk chat, join my groups, and ask questions about the things that you kind of feel like you're hitting your head against the wall with, because like you're trying to fix it, you're trying to change it, but you keep failing, like you can't get past that point. But honestly, the best thing that you can do is just pick up a camera. Just pick up your camera and keep shooting. But don't just stop with I suck. After the I suck part, go have a drink, come back, and look at it and say, what should I have done differently? What can I change? How can I make it better? And then that's how you're gonna go from there. So all right, scrolling on down here. Where was it? K. Adam Christensen. Is there much of a difference between a normal shoot-through umbrella versus a deep shoot-through umbrella, other than the accessories for it? I'm not seeing much of a difference. Something I'm missing. Not really. So the trick is, hang on, guys. Sorry, bear with me just 1 second here. This truly is an adventure tonight. Let's just get rid of that. There we go. So anyway, I have a video, in fact, here. Let me find this video, because I think this will help your thought process a little bit. Let's switch over to here, and I'm going to type in beauty dish. The real key to the answer to your question is actually not is there a difference, but it's how well do you understand the inverse square law? And you don't have to answer me. I'm just saying hypothetically, okay? In this video that I'm sharing the link with, when you get a chance, go ahead and watch it. you'll see where I took a small $19 shoot-through umbrella, and I basically replicated side by side the exact same light that I get out of a beauty dish, right? So when you're comparing, like, you know, kind of the regular shoot-through umbrella and then the deep ones, yeah, they're going to manage the light a little bit differently. In theory, the deeper one is not going to spread the light as fast, in theory, right? If you're using it as a shoot-through, yeah, it'll spread a little bit slower, but it's not going to retard it nearly as much as if you were using a covered parabolic or a beauty dish or even grids, etc. So if you're feeling confident in your command of the inverse square law, then there's really, honestly, there's no difference, because you'll be able to accomplish the same thing with both of them. And it's going to be a matter of maybe, you know, setting one slightly closer than the other. But in terms of what you're going to see in the finished image, now you're going to be able to do the same thing. So it'd basically be almost identical. Okay. Let's see here. And all right. Annie, Joe, do you have any videos on outside wedding photography tips? Just use the starting point. I'm not a professional, a little overwhelmed. So first of all, no, I don't shoot weddings. Sorry. Okay. So Annie, tell me though, and I'm going to hang in here for a couple minutes. So tight for me. Okay. What are you overwhelmed by? If you're not a professional, what are you shooting that leaves you overwhelmed? I'm a little curious there. Okay. So give me some feedback, and let me at least try and point you in the right direction. Okay. All right. While Annie's typing, I think I have covered everybody here. Sorry, man. Sorry. EM1 Mark III, Robbie Namar, do you have or know any guides to set up the cameras? The menus are a bit more convoluted than the Pentax cameras I moved from. The menus are not convoluted. I hate when people say that. I'm not mad at you. I'm just saying they're actually not. I find the menus to make so much sense. What you have to understand is there's so many more features, literally, and this is not an ambassador talking. I'm telling you straight. There are so many more features in the Olympus cameras. That's why the menus are overwhelming, because there's so much more in there, right? That being said, GetOlympus.com, you'll find a bunch. You'll find some on YouTube, with the EM1 Mark III being fairly new. But here's the thing, be careful. My sincere advice, if you're getting the camera tomorrow, don't worry about setting up the menus. Bad idea. What you need to do is you need to read the instruction manual, and then you need to go use the camera. Because I'll tell you what I did. I did all kind of research before I got my first Olympus camera, my EM1 Mark II. And I saw all that stuff about customizing menus. I'm like, oh, yeah, I want to do this. And I found two people that had similar setups for doing portraits and all that kind of stuff. So no sooner did I get the camera, I put all their settings in. Put the camera down for 3 days, picked the camera up again, and couldn't use the damn camera. And then to double down on the problem, what's the first thing you do when you can't figure out where something is? Because I couldn't remember where all the settings were. I went and pulled out the manual, and everything in the manual made no sense because I had changed and customized all the settings. Don't customize the camera until you've used it for a while. Like, literally, don't customize the camera. That's not the way to do it, okay? Learn the camera. If you're making that kind of investment, learn the camera. Learn how the camera works. Learn what the camera can do for you. Stop looking for shortcuts. Like, tonight's been the night of shortcuts. Sorry, folks. I love y'all, but, man, there's been so many people, like, just begging for shortcuts tonight. Stop. There's no shortcuts. Put in the work. Put in the work. You'll make great photography. You just will. So, okay. Let's see here. What else? I thought there was one more that I missed up here. I'm waiting for Annie. Annie, help me out. Give me some more stuff there. Life's beautiful. Have I used a lighter torch? No. You couldn't pay me to use the lighter torch. It's too small. Yeah, I'm not a fan of them. It's a gimmick light. You know, it's great if you just need some extra light. You're using a GoPro or something like that. Yeah. So, Here's Andy's follow-up. I'm just not confident as to when to use flash and what flash to use, if any, during ceremony, what to use when doing the group photos. Usually said. So, Andy, are you shooting weddings for money at this point? So, because Andy, I'm going to be honest with you, and it fits in our theme tonight, okay? When to use flash, when not to use flash, and what flash to use. So let's just take that piece right there, right? Don't ask another photographer. That's like the worst thing in the world that you could do. Because first of all, the way that I shoot is not the way that you shoot. That's reason number one. Reason number two, I may be thinking about a church that I was just in last Saturday and shot a wedding. So I'm going to answer it based on that experience that I just had. You're going to walk into a church this Saturday. The church could be a lot brighter. It could be a lot darker. So what I did and what I'm telling you about, it's not going to work. So what I'm going to tell you that you're going to then go out and do, not going to work, right? So, in terms of what flash to use the flash that you have. Like, are you going to go out and buy a flash just for a friend's wedding? That's a really bad idea. So you're going to buy a flash for the friend's wedding, then use it for the first time at the wedding? Oh my God, how to screw up a wedding in one easy lesson right there, okay? If you don't know how to do lighting, do not do it for the first time at your friend's wedding. Worst idea ever. Shoot natural light. There's nothing wrong with natural light. Granted, gosh, it's hard work because you got to pay attention to your light meter. Oh, but you do, right? But shoot natural light, okay? During a ceremony, most churches, not all, so you don't all start typing in your exceptions. Most churches don't want you using strobes during the ceremony, and honestly, you kind of shouldn't use them during the ceremony unless the bride and groom are like all about it. Like, yeah, go ahead, fire off 1,000 flashes during the ceremony. Go for it. It's just distracting, right? So, to me, no, I wouldn't do that. And settings for bright sunlight, don't ask a photographer for the settings of bright sunlight. I can tell you, shoot at ISO 200, 1/250th of a second at f16. That's the exposure for bright sunlight, provided that you've got your bride and groom staring at the sun. Probably not what you want them doing, right? You want to put them in the shade, or at least want the sun behind them so that they're backlit, so their eyes are actually open, in which case then you're going to shoot at f8. But you have a light meter in your camera. And if you're shooting mirrorless, all the more reason then the exposure's there. But, Annie, I know I'm being a little tough on you, but seriously, if you're shooting your friend's wedding, if you're the photographer for your friend's wedding, like if you're doing your friend a favor and you're taking the pictures, that's cool. It's totally cool. But that means you're responsible for the pictures for the most important day of that girl's life, okay? So simplify things. You're telling me on one hand you're not a pro, you're just doing it for a friend, so don't be a pro. Do what you know, take the best possible pictures you can, right? What I would encourage you to do, Annie, is make sure that wherever the wedding's going, I saw your message, it's going to be outside, so that's cool. Actually, that makes your life a lot easier. But go there in advance. Go there in advance at the time of the day that the wedding is. Walk around, look around, scope out spots where you can take group pictures, where you can take pictures of the bride and groom, figure it all out. If they're going to do the wedding, let's say it's at a park, just hypothetically, it's in a park, and maybe they're even going to have the reception underneath a tent there. Okay, good. So you know where you're going to be in the evening then when the sun goes down. So hang around there, like literally hang out, or go get dinner and come back, and come back and look and see what the lighting is there when the sun goes down. See where's the sun going to be when it goes down. And basically map out all the things you can do in advance. What you should also do if you're the photographer for the wedding is you should sit down with the bride and the groom and really get a sense of what pictures do they absolutely want you to take, right? And there's a balance when you do this. Don't let the bride and groom just write your whole shot list. That's usually a bad plan. But obviously there's going to be important pictures. Maybe they've got somebody coming in from out of town, all that kind of stuff. And it's important to get a picture of them. Make sure you know who the important players are, okay? But from a photography standpoint, kiss it. Keep it super simple. Focus on what's in front of the camera. Make sure the backgrounds are clean. Make sure you get great moments, personality, energy. But don't go into it doing stuff that you've never done before. You're just begging to fail when you do that. Honestly, it's one of the easiest ways to just blow a shoot. So that would be my advice. Okay. All right, last one here. George, I'm going to get yours, and then I got to wrap up. I'm way over time. I did a photo shoot for my cousin. She has a beauty blog. After seeing my photos, she said I made her look ugly, where her own photos with her iPhone don't. Second part, she looked at the photos and she said her eyes look ugly, her double chin shows. I shot her from a lower angle. I wonder if that was correct. Well, George, without seeing the pictures, obviously it's kind of impossible for me to tell you. Generally, if a person's got a heavier face and a double chin, you don't want to look up at the double chin. You actually want to look down at the double chin. But yeah, I mean, part of what you have to understand if you're going to shoot for a beauty blogger, okay? Number one, they're going to be a pain in the butt. Number two, she's a bigger pain in the butt because you're related to her. Number three, what you should have done if you didn't do it is you should have taken a really, really good look at her blog and her style and her look and her feel. And I'm talking lighting, the way she processes her own images, all that stuff. Because if your images have a different feel or a different vibe, she hates them before she even looks at herself, right? So again, you know, it's the whole, okay, I need pictures for the blog. Okay, great. But that's actually not the why. Why do you need pictures for the blog? What are you trying to communicate with these pictures? That kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, George, what I would encourage you to do, if you want more feedback on it, we can do one of two things. Either join my Facebook group, the I Shoot People group, which is this one that you see right here. I'll share the link. Or you can visit my website, joeedelman.com, click on the mentoring tab, and consider joining my mentoring group. In the mentoring group, you would be able to get those pictures reviewed, all that kind of stuff. We can help you figure out exactly what you need to do to get better shots of her going forward, all that kind of stuff. You can join the mentoring group for as little as $5 a month, and you get direct access to me to be able to get help with what you're doing. So, Danny, I remember meeting you at WPPI. It's great to see you. All right, gang. I'm going to say goodnight. So I feel like I was really tough on you guys tonight. I'm not going to lie. I'm sorry, but lazy stuff is just not going to get it there, right? Okay? So seriously, thank you guys for hanging out for the evening. Please go pick up your cameras, shoot, take pictures, do some practice. I know it's still hard. I still can't do shoots. So believe me, I'm like chomping at the bit. I want to get out and I want to shoot. I still can't do it. So, you know, I get it. It's tough, but don't look for the easy solutions. Put in the work and do great work, because the knowledge that you learn by putting in the work, it's going to carry you forever. And that's what you want. Okay? So, gang, listen, as always, have a great week. Hope to see you next week. Whatever you do, don't forget these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TOGCHAT. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.